Welcome, listeners, to www.ironradio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. Thanks for listening.
Good morning, everybody. This is Phil Stevens. You're on Iron Radio. I am a powerlifter, Highland Games athlete, strength coach, youth sport coach, bunch of things.
Hey, what's going on? This is Dr. Mike T. Nelson, creator of the Flex Diet Cert, which opens again January 15th through January 22nd, 2024. And other than that, just hanging out here in cold Minnesota.
Very cold.
Mm-hmm.
This is Coach Durrell at Strength Guild in Kansas City. We are also participating in the cold weather shenanigans this weekend, but coaching weightlifting, some strongman, powerlifting, and gym owner.
Indeed. And I'm Lonnie Lowry, also a doctor, a PhD type, not the kind, like my wife says, you're the kind of doctor that doesn't make lots of money.
The real doctor.
Right. No, that's right. I love Darren Willoughby saying, I'm a real type. That's the real former competitive bodybuilder, professor, back in the saddle teaching, early spring courses. And so,
Ooh.
Yeah, when this brutal weather flows in and everything turns to a sheet of ice, I was just bitching to Phil and Jarrell that I'm not going to be out on crutches trying to navigate black ice. I'm not going to do it.
Oh, no.
So they're going to have to get audio or something. Speaking of which, I know that you've got some recording and a workshop online stuff going on, Mike.
Yeah, so we have two things, which sometimes is a little confusing. So the certification, the Flex Diet certification, which is primarily nutrition, a little bit of recovery, everything from protein, fats, carbohydrates, NEAT, sleep, micros, macros, all that stuff. That'll be opening again for just 1 week, so January 15th through the 22nd. And go to flexdiet.com. You can sign up early for the wait list. You got some super cool bonus items and everything. And then at the end of the month, which Lonnie is very graciously participating in also, I have a 3-day event that is the Flex Diet Metabolism Virtual Summit. So we're getting probably have like 30 plus speakers, and they're going to do talks. So we'll have those arranged. You can get them for free. It'll be Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I'll have a schedule posted coming up pretty soon. And then Lonnie's doing a talk, I think, on some functional coffee stuff. We've got Kelly and Juliette Starrett, Lee Boyce, Dan John, Rick Collins, Allie Gilbert, Luke Lehman, a whole bunch of people. So if people want more information on that, I'm blanking on what the exact website is because we changed it so many times. But if you just go to my Instagram, which is just Dr. Mike T. Nelson, you'll be able to find everything there. Or if you just look online for anything that I've got, you'll be able to find it there. I want to say it's flexdietsummit.com, but don't quote me on that. So, yeah, and it's free to sign up. I know, I should know the URL better than what I do, but it's just been crazy trying to get everyone corralled and trying to get all the talks in and the titles and the organization. And I've got another guy helping me with it. But, yeah, just go to my Instagram. You can sign up there, and they'll be showing Friday, Saturday, Sunday at the end of the month. It'll be free. And then we'll have an offer if people do want to buy the lectures and keep them and download them and do whatever they want. There'll be an option there at some point, too. But don't necessarily need to. Just put their email in, and they could get free access to them that weekend.
That's cool. It's free. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of one of those deals where it's like, everyone's kind of donating their time, and they've been graciously doing me a favor. And so it's nice to be able to get that out to, hopefully more people. And if they want some good information, then check that out. If they want more of a system of actually how to do nutrition coaching and training with a lot more details, then check out the Flex Diet Cert.
Right on. All right. I have a little bit of news. I always do. And sort of thematically with what Mike is saying. One's about coffee. I got this from two different sources. I got this from a Iron Radio listener, and I also got it from a colleague. This is from Science Alert. It's in the physics section. So this would be weird to anybody who's not like a Mike T. Nelson engineer kind of thinking, but they're applying physics to coffee. So scientists have discovered a way to actually make coffee taste better. Now, I would rewrite that title. What do you mean actually make it taste better? It probably already tastes good. I'm offended. as I take a swig. This is by Claire Watson, late December, 29 December 23. It says, stop with the salt. Adding a dash of water to coffee beans before grinding them could be the secret to better tasting cup of caffeinated goodness, new research suggests. I would also sidebar this. You can still add a tiny pinch of salt to coffee. I do that when the coffee is stale. We all know what it's like. Oh, there's a little bit left in the pot from yesterday. I'm desperate. Utility coffee. If you want to kind of, in my experience, get rid of some of that staleness, a tiny pinch, not enough to make it like, freaking soup broth or something, but that's a trick that, coffee connoisseurs have done for a long time. People
tiny
might want
pinch of salt, you said?
a tiny pinch. Yeah, just, tiny dash of salt, but you don't need much. And it does revive it. Anyway, this trick boils down to reducing the amount of static electricity, because that happens during the grinding of whole beans. So especially if you're grinding your beans fresh, and a lot of people like to do this kind of stuff. I was looking at hand grinders. People say you need those burr grinders or, not the blade type because it's, not as uniform, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, so coffee buffs have also been spritzing their beans with a little bit of water. And this new research kind of measured all that, right? So they want to go actually document this stuff. Here's a quote. It says, moisture, whether it's residual moisture inside the roasted coffee or external moisture that you add during grinding, is what dictates the amount of charge that gets formed. And apparently that's just very problematic. And this, according to Christopher Hendon, a materials chemist at the University of Oregon. He has also shown in the past that freezing coffee beans before you use them improves the flavor. Now that's interesting. I had not heard that. The more I think about this, freezing almost anything before you use it seems to be a good idea, which is sort of appropriate in this deep freeze the whole country is heading into.
Stick my coffee outside my door.
Right, and then it gets frozen, and then really it tastes better. You know what I'm thinking, like, rice, bread, resistant starch formation, all that stuff.
Right.
So better for you. In this case, it would be better tasting. It says Harper, Hendon, and colleagues compared a bunch of commercially sourced and lab-roasted coffee beans, which varied in their origin and the roasting time and the moisture. A lot of that stuff that kind of Mike and I have talked about in academic papers. It's very important, grind size and type of roast and all that. But they measured the static electricity in each batch after grinding, as well as the particle size, and then the flavor. Apparently, drier, darker roasts that used in the team's experiments produced more electrostatic charges than the lighter roast. So that's sad face for me. I like dark roast, really bold coffee. But, you spritz it with some water first. And the whole idea here is that adding a little water before, because it softens everything, it kind of helps with the extraction time, right? That's what you want. You want to extract all that goodness out of those beans. And I know I'm going off the deep end with food science. So gym bros are like, enough, Lowry, but half a milliliter for a typical espresso shot. It doesn't take much. You don't have to pre-soak it or anything. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting stuff. So yes, there's the salt trick, there's the freezing trick, and there's even this concept of just spritzing beforehand to increase the extraction. It says it makes it stronger too. So I'm not sure if they're referring to stronger in flavor or stronger in caffeine. Probably both. Caffeine's water soluble, so you'd think softening the grounds a little bit would be good. The study was published in the journal Matter. So again, hardcore physics applied to something useful.
Do you think if you've opened some dark roast beans, some of the ones we get are much more oily? I always thought it was just they have more of the the oils and the flavor and the polyphenols and stuff, but maybe that oil combats some of the electrical charge, and that may add to why I think it tastes a little bit better then, based on this.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, the diterpenes in coffee and some of this stuff do definitely impact the mouthfeel and the flavor and all that, and the crema and all that kind of stuff. It stands to reason what you're saying is true. I mean, this doesn't talk about the oils, and I don't know. I would say even if they're oily, maybe spritz it a little bit with water, but you're right. Probably if it's just sort of nice and rich and it's got some of those fancy coffee lipids, probably good for the static electricity too.
I'll have to try that out.
Okay. Next up, I got approval from Human Kinetics publishers to offer some sneak peeks. I'm working on a book, and yes, there are some chapters that aren't this, but I just want to get to the meat and potatoes for podcast listeners. And that is chapter 3 in this book. It's called Athlete's Guide to Sports Supplements. We're going to do a new edition, and it's just a gigantic list of different herbs and compounds, supplements of every kind, and what's the deal. So I randomly pulled one. If anybody has a request, toss it at me. It's almost definitely already in the book. And Corey, the editor, he's been on the show. Mike, of course, knows. I think we all pretty much know Corey. He gave me this big list of new ones. He's like, can you also add these? I'm like, oh. Fine. Anyway,
I'm laughing because that's the joy of doing a book. It's a bigger pain in the ass than anybody realizes.
Oh, man. I know, right? Yes. So I pulled, this is apple cider vinegar. And if anybody's like, who cares about that? It's surprising what I've read about this because I had to do a little bit. I'm not going to say I did a super deep dive, but, I dug into these things. So apple cider vinegar, I'll just go through this a little bit, and we'll do this every once in a while. Acetic acid, right? There's apple phenols. You could look this up in various ways online. What is it? Old home remedy, and I'm just going to read this. Fermented sugars from crushed apples. The main volatile component in vinegars, of course, is acetic acid, which gives them that strong sour flavor and aroma. Apple cider vinegar also contains chlorogenic acid, so that's a coffee favorite, of course. A major phenol in the liquid and potentially a further contributor to any benefits. How does it work? Well, relevant to athletes, apple cider vinegar may modestly enhance fat loss. I didn't believe this at first. Highly skeptical. I just want everybody to know there are some data to suggest this. Possibly through increased satiety because of what the acetic acid does in your stomach, essentially, in your gut. Or effects on blood sugar and insulin action. Maybe also some inhibition of lipogenesis. So again, that fat creation and storage. Mediated by decreases in gene expression of fatty acid synthase. So some of the machinery in your cells that makes fat might be inhibited, and or acetyl-CoA carboxylase. So ACC is how your body sort of builds fatty acids, and if that's going to get inhibited, that could be a good thing. So these are all potential mechanisms. Let me offer a caveat. Anytime I talk about something from the book, one of these substances, I'm taking a fairly liberal view of this. If I took a very strict view, I mean, I read papers that even said fish oils don't work, right, for various things. I'm like, oh. Like, how can you're setting the bar so high, right, that you're going to, miss something. Like, I don't know, a type 2 error kind of thing. Anyway, performance benefit, apple cider vinegar, it's not likely to enhance performance directly. It may be supportive, but only in the fact that it reduces body fat or body mass. And that could, in theory, help like an aerobic athlete over time. But that's really kind of a reach, in my opinion. Sports relying on low body fat or body mass, fat mass like bodybuilding, even weight class sports, those could benefit. Now, you have to be careful the way you use these acid type of ingredients like apple cider vinegar because, it can damage your teeth and stuff like that. A little bit of research, perhaps surprisingly, some Japanese research does support reduced fat and body weight in obese subjects. If you want to go look, Kondo et al., 2009. Again, this is sort of a little lit review. Healthy participants, too, have exhibited a dose-response effect on blood glucose and insulin action. Again, dose response, higher doses of the acetic acid from the apple cider vinegar in response to a white bread meal. And we've done white bread challenges with coffee before and anything that, might jack up your insulin and your blood sugar, as well as increased subjective rating of satiety. So higher satiety, that's Ostman et al., 2005. I do kind of conclude more research is needed. I know that's a cop-out, but, we're just kind of exploring here. It says common usage, those interested in controlling hunger, decreasing fat mass, or reducing the glycemic effect of carbs may consume 15 to 30 milliliters, so that's 1 to 2 tablespoons, mixed into a large glass of water. So I wouldn't do this straight. I mix it, dilute it with lots of water. Sensitive individuals may also rinse with more water after ingestion to avoid any caustic effects. Again, it's acetic acid. Health concerns, vinegar ingestion may exacerbate tooth enamel erosion, although it may reduce the quantitative and subjective measures of appetite. This could be due to some nausea. So, yeah, it's going to kill your appetite, but if it's making you nauseous because you made it too strong, yeah, that's going to kill your appetite. So you got to be careful with the way you use this. But it's enough to make me, a little bit interested. Let's put it that way, like 1 to 2 tablespoons. I'm not trying to sell any of this stuff. This is just a very, like I said, very liberal and forgiving kind of little review. But a lot of people, they talk about like a lot of these the fermented type products, they'll talk about the mother and some of the probiotic and prebiotic effects and that kind of stuff. But with apple cider vinegar, it's probably just the acetic acid. It's probably just the acetate. So anyway, I thought that was sort of interesting. I was very skeptical about apple cider vinegar. Sometimes I'll throw a teaspoon in, I make protein, the little packets of protein oatmeal. Like there's like an apple cinnamon one. And I'll throw a little bit of this. And I'm like, apples with apples, okay. and I'll just throw it in thinking it might slow down the blood sugar rush of it a little bit or something like that. So anyway, that's the entry for this week.
Interesting.
Okay, that's about all I've got. I know we were going to talk about cold weather. It's just a little too early to go to break, but I think we can move in that direction.
Hey everybody, Iron Radio is back, and in an expanded way. What can you expect? Well, first, you can get it simulcast every week on the nutritionradio.org network, as well as on the original podcast. It'll appear regularly on iTunes, Spotify, and all your favorite podcasting sites. We have a new Iron Radio / Nutrition Radio Facebook page as well. Please check us out. We're even backed up on YouTube. We hope that an expanded presence will get you the news, education, banter, and guests that's made Iron Radio's community so loyal from the start. You are appreciated.
Obviously, the whole country is heading into a deep freeze. Phil's got highs of -1 coming up here.
Yeah, that's basically what kicked us off. We started just talking about the cold and like the football games coming up. Like we have a NFL game here tonight, and it could potentially break the record of the coldest game ever. Right now, the coldest game ever is like -13, and of course, Green Bay. And I think the kickoff here is supposed to be like -5 or something like that. So like, we'll see where it ends up. And but we were just talking about then, of course, as people that train, gets us into talking about, you know, how are these athletes going to handle it? And then you got people from different areas, you know, that are more or less climatized to the temperatures and how they react. And, you know, we talked about like when I moved away to Phoenix for 3 years and then come back to cold, and like 40 is like, oh my God, it's freezing because you're used to 120, or when I come from here and visit California. But I know for me, just cold got worse as I got older, you know,
Yeah.
and I think that's just joints and things. You know,
Joints.
it's just wear and tear on the body. And for me, like right now, I got to go train after this, and my warehouse will be, if it's 1 out, it's probably 3 in my warehouse when I walk in.
We're not doing much.
It ain't a big difference. So, you know, I've got pipe heaters on all my water and stuff like that so we don't blow lines. But when we get in there, it's going to be chilly. And, you know, my warm up in the summer, you know, because like if it's 100 degrees out, it's at least 100 in my gym. So, and the warm up is very expedient. Whereas today, like probably 80% of our training session will be just get the body moving and warmed up. And sadly, we have to go heavy today. So that'll be fun. No, and just ways you know, how do you react with your athletes to cold? Like with my sport athletes, we were talking about, we had a few games this year with my football team. And our big thing before the game was we had one game, it was like 33 degrees and raining on these boys. You know, our big deal was like, at this point in time, we're not practicing plays. We're not doing stuff like that. We're keeping your core temperature up without trying to wear you out. And that's not just for performance. I mean, that's like tonight, my biggest worry about, from a coach's perspective, about the athletes playing on the field is injury.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You know, I mean, you got, at this point in an NFL season, nobody's 100%.
Right.
They're all nursing things. And, you know, you got hamstrings tightening up, ankles, like the mobility of joints is just not going to be right at negative degree temperatures. And it's not like these guys can bundle up a ton because they still have to be super athletic. I mean, unless they all sat down and agreed, okay, every one of us is going to bundle the fuck up. And so that's going to detract all your athleticism 25%, you know, but no, you're going to have guys out there with no sleeves on still and making a living. Because I know a lot of these guys, they get playoff paychecks. You know, if they win, they get a bonus. And so you paying me like $2 million if you win the game. Dude, I'm going to go out there and bust ass.
Right.
You know?
Yep.
So it's a different level for them than it is us. Like me, when I go in the gym today, I guarantee you I'm not going to lift what I normally would. Because if you put a $2 million paycheck on the line, I'd go in there and squat a PR. So I mean, that's right. Incentive.
Motivation.
So, but
it's a good point, Phil, about the like rain and stuff like that. Like at least when you're lifting, usually you got a roof over your head, you know. everybody, we were talking before we hit the record button on the software about, stories we have from lifting when it's cold. I mean, there's no doubt when you grab a frozen barbell, like really cold barbell, that'll drain the hand warmth right out of your arms, right up your arm, But that doesn't usually happen. I mean, thank God. I can't say I've ever lifted. I mean, I don't know how you really could without being dangerous, like lifted in the rain. But that would suck, man. That's something that team sports, I think, have to deal with more than, people just in the gym and stuff like that. But yeah, once I was in a gym, it was a really hardcore gym called Muscle Gym. It's one of these low budget places. And I know Phil has some stories about low budget, cheap bastards who they're like, it's hardcore. It's like, right. It's like, you don't want to pay for the heat. There's a fine line between hardcore and just busted, or cheap. But I was in this muscle gym, and it was like a warehouse. Half the roof was a parachute. That was it. It was just a parachute. And they just had space heaters around, and, people would try to huddle around and get warm between sets and stuff like that. You're kind of playing with fire with that kind of stuff, especially as you get older. Yeah, when you're young and your joints are so cushy and elastic, maybe it's less of a problem. I don't know, but I sound like a pop of popcorn already, so.
I'm still not convinced. I think we can do it when we're younger, but I'm not convinced we should.
No, agreed.
I think we're actually doing a lot of damage in that stuff. Yeah. And but the hard part is, how do you tell that to an 18-year-old kid? Like, I want you to warm up more. He's like, Coach, I feel great. I'm ready to go.
Right. No, there's no doubt. I mean, all this scar tissue that creaks and pops when Kelly was looking at me the other day. I was just doing some overhead, like triceps things on the couch, she looking at me because my elbows are making so much noise. I'm like, that's all those years. Yeah. Even when you're young, you think you're not, adding up on that. So.
And that builds into, like, when we talk about sleeves and stuff. Like, I used to be in my late 20s, 30s, I don't need sleeves, whatever, But now as I look back, it's like, if I'd have just warmed up my joints with those, how much better would I be now? Because it's just the warmth around the joint, like sleeves. Right. When we get down to it, it's not doing a lot. But if you just get those joints warm and fluid, like how many million reps did I do like that? And how much would have that, helped the issue 20 years down the road? It's hard to tell, but for God's sakes, I can tell you this, it couldn't have hurt.
Right. That's right.
So I know that for 100%. So
last fall, I bought one of those sleeves. It's really just like nylon thing. I see a lot of kids in team sports doing them. Like, it's like hosiery, really. It just goes up my arm. It just makes it feel warmer. If I'm going to lift heavier, I break out something that's a little stiffer for my elbow. But hell yeah, I started doing some of that stuff when I was in my probably 30s. And now it's just straight necessary. It's funny when you walk into the gym, you see some of the older guys, including these guys that have been just heroic. The guys like Dave Tate and, Eddie Cohn and all these guys. And everybody's got like the black joints from they've all got pads on and sleeves. I mean, stuff like that. But yeah, the cold weather is not doing anybody any favors. I know the advice over the years has changed for warm-ups a little bit, but generally I think it's something like a 5-minute warm-up to get like a 1 degree change in soft tissue or something. Mike, you would know that.
Yeah, I don't remember what the exact stats are, but the two things I have known, similar to what you guys have found over the years, is that soft tissue wise, because I usually train in my garage, and up until 2 years ago, it wasn't heated. But my wife was really nice and let me put the barbells in the kitchen because when the garage would be 17 or 30 degrees, you could put on enough clothes and you could warm up. I could do some stuff on the rower and I could get my soft tissue and everything feeling pretty good. But touching a 2-inch solid axle that's, at 30 degrees, it just sucks the ever living heat out of your hands and it becomes painful.
Yeah.
To the point where it was like not doing the best for my lift. So now I have the temp at 45. It's just enough where the barbells are cold, but it doesn't suck all the heat out of your hands because, man, you could tell right away, like your hands get real stiff and sore and you're like, oh, this sucks.
Yeah, you're just distracted. It's hard to even focus on the lift. Yeah.
Yeah, that's when you got to be hardcore, Mike. Yeah.
More hardcore. And
Yeah.
that was the thing that annoyed me. And people are like, well, bro, just wear gloves. I'm like, that doesn't work so good for grip stuff.
Yeah. No,
I imagine.
and that's like my big deal with the sport athletes and stuff was just that. We were talking about before the show, we'd watch the other team and like they're running full out plays and things like that for an hour before the game, which is fine. But our biggest deal was like we're just going to move enough and constantly. Basically, we just constantly had them moving at low impact, fairly low level activity, just to get core temperature up. That's it.
Yep.
Like we just want you where you're not cold. And that's what we did. Like for an hour, we're going to walk around. And then we might do a couple jumping jacks, then walk a little more. And that's my biggest thing on warm-ups. And that's what I think people mess up on warm-ups is 80% of my warm-ups is at super lightweight. If like today, because I'm going fairly heavy. So we will spend a lot of time at like 135 on a squat just to get warm. Like we may do 6-7 sets there. Like low resistance, just get right until, and I've talked about it numerous times on the show, like at this point in my training age, I know what 135, 225, 315, 405 is supposed to feel like on an average day. Like I don't need to go off 135 in this cold until 135 feels like 135. If I'm aching and groaning, it's like, well, why the hell am I packing another plate on? Stay there. And I would suggest this, especially for damn near any lifter. Like, don't go up in your warm up until it feels right and good.
Yeah.
Like, and I see that all the time. Like, 135 felt like shit. Let's go ahead and pack 225 on. It's like, what are you doing?
Right.
Like, you expect that to feel better?
That's right.
It's almost double the weight, and it's going to be great. Now, like, what indication did you get that 225 is going to feel better than 135 when 135 felt like shit? And just because you need to go up there, and people get married to their warm up. Like, that's just what I do. I go here, set. Well, not if here and here felt bad. Like we need those to feel right. And like numerous times, every time I train, like I will stay at a weight if it does not feel right.
The other part about training in the cold, as like if you have the cold gym, is not sitting down. Like you getting cold, like or starting to warm up. Yes, get I like doing the sled now for most of my athletes. It's like the easiest warm up. But the other part is like you sit down, particularly when you have lifters and they get on Instagram or something. And then it's like, oh shit, I'm cold. And then that's worse for us than the like warm up and stuff like that. Once you're warm, life's easy, but then you sit down for a minute, you accidentally get too cold, then you try to touch the bar again. Yeah. And it's all bad. I mean, it's true in the summer too, but this time it's like you feel it in your bones.
Mm-hmm.
That's a fine line, and that's for these sport athletes and the people playing tonight. Like, there's also, they talk about it all the time when you're, I don't know if you guys ever watch like those Arctic exhibition shows and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you need to get hot, but the minute you start sweating, you're fucked.
Yeah.
And that's going to be tough. Like, they have to think about things like this. Do we leave this dude in for a full series of plays where he's busting ass and now all of a sudden he's sweaty and he comes off the sideline? Like, let's say he's a defensive player, whatever. Doesn't matter. Either side of the ball. So play him the whole series. He knocks out, 20 plays in a row where he's going all out against another dude his size. Hits the sideline. Now the offense is out there. Dude's all sweaty. By the time 10 minutes later, he's a fucking ice cube.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So that's tough. So, I mean, they're going to have to balance all that. Like, we had to pull kids out. Like, okay, you do 4 plays, run off. You do 4 plays, run off. Because you don't want them getting too hot, because then that's going to kill them. And I mean, it could be the same thing in the gym. Like, you need to, if you're in a non-climatized place, like that's not going to be warm, man, you're going to be in trouble if you get all too hot.
There's a lot to manage. I mean, even like from the nutrition side of you, I mean, honestly, that's going to be my lens, but you have to feed people a lot. I know Mike and I have seen this over the years. You guys have probably all heard about like people who hike long distances in the cold. They have gigantic calorie needs, gigantic.
Oh yeah.
I've seen studies where guys were hiking across like frozen like Lake Superior and stuff, and they were eating like 5,000 calories a day and losing weight, apparently, and stuff like that. And I mean, Yeah, you got to stoke those mitochondrial furnaces, man. You can't, imagine, like a dieting bodybuilder trying to train in the cold, already depressed metabolism and all that. And it does make me wonder. It'd be a cool study. I've never seen it, but all this talk about pre-workouts and thermogenics, would that actually help you warm up faster? I mean, I know that's more systemic than local, right? I mean, Jarrell, you're talking about sleds, and Phil, you're talking about squats and stuff. These are such whole body movements. You're kind of getting the systemic overall picture as opposed to joint specific because they're compound movements. But it is the nice thing, you're getting your joints involved too. I'm just thinking like bodybuilders with, like, if they do any isolation work, like I might try to just warm up, like you were saying, like lightweight, slightly heavier, without exhausting myself beforehand. But a couple of warm-up sets specific to that joint, to try to get the tissue going after the systemic, right? I mean, for a God, since I was probably 30, I would just start every workout, just go to the gym. I just go right to some piece of random cardio equipment, preferably like elliptical that I can use my arms a little. And I would just ramp up harder, more and more intense for 10 minutes. And then I'd get off and be like, okay, I'm feeling pretty good now.
Yeah.
And when it's cold, that would just become absolutely critical, I would think.
What you guys would know better than me, like fuel source wise, what are we looking for? Like an athlete or somebody that's, okay, I need to be out in the -8-degree temperatures for the next 4 hours. Like which fuel source are we talking that's getting tapped into to up ramp? Because I mean, my guess is your basic metabolism level up ramps quite a bit just to keep your body warm, right?
Whether you shiver or not. I'll let Mike take this one. I know he knows this.
So if you look at a lot of the old environmental studies, the military spent a lot of money on this, and I spent, way too long reading like every study I could find for the PhysFlexor. So I've got a whole section on cold water immersion and sauna and that type of thing. But yeah, like what Lonnie was saying is correct, that in general, if your activity is not high intensity, so if we stick you in like a bunch of cold water immersion to get your tissue and everything cold as fast as possible, you do use more fat acutely. But the second you start shivering, shivering is basically a high intensity muscle contraction. Then you actually shift to using carbohydrates. Okay. So as far as I know, I wouldn't, if it was me personally, I still primarily look at the total caloric need and bump that up. And then what is the intensity of the athletes doing? Yep. So for an NFL game, I probably wouldn't change anything other than increasing the total number of calories. But on the side note, I have a guy I'm working with, Akshay, and he's working this October to be the first person to cross all of Antarctica unsupported, pulling all of his own food, materials, sled, everything.
Oh, wow.
And so for him, like one of the things we're looking at is what is the most dense source of calories, because one, he's cold, two, he's going to be doing a lot of movement, and three, he's got to pull all of his own food. So a lot of fat, ketones, that kind of stuff. In terms of weight loss, I talked to him the other day, and he is already trying to add more weight because he said he expects to probably lose 35 to 40 pounds over the course of the expedition. And again, that's compounded because he's in the cold and he's literally moving, 8, 10, 12 hours a day.
Yeah, we used to have a guy here who used to work apparently he likes working at, I want to say it was Antarctica, but could easily have been something else. But it was Antarctica, and he told us about, we always make fun of him for pocket butter. So they used to keep the squares of butter in their pocket, and then as they were working, like they had to go out in the cold, as they were working, they would pop it, almost like a Werther's Original or something, and just suck on it. So they just kept hitting these little butter cubes.
Just to keep the caloric expenditure up. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I see that. Dense calories, like that's going to be about as dense as you're going to get, really.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I know clinically, I had my old nutrition mentor, Mike Jenkins, used to talk about butter balls. Yeah. And they would do the same thing. Like kids are on a ketogenic diet, whatever it is. You got to get calories in there, man.
Yeah.
They're growing kids and whatever. Yeah, and butter balls were some of the ways. I think they would roll them in coconut or something. I don't know, but anyway, you can get it in. So it's a good point, Phil. Like, which of your two fuels, which are your choices, I would think just more of everything in a really practical way. But especially I think afterward, before and after, if you're going to carb load a little, there's a lot of stuff recently. It's fun to talk to some fellow dietitians. They'll be like, oh, carb loading before surgery is a big thing. It's very helpful. And I'm like, carb loading before a physically stressful thing, that's something athletes have always done.
Yeah.
It prepares you for the depletion. I mean, what is recovery? It's putting back something you've lost, right? So it could be, there could be some tissue microtrauma and all that, but some of this is substrate depletion, man. And I mean, I can't imagine being out shivering in the rain, on a football field or whatever. I mean, because even under good conditions, it's something like with fairly intense exercise, you can go through half to all of your glycogen, your carb stores in like 1 to 2 hours.
Yeah.
So these guys truly depleted in the second half. They're frozen. The fuel's gone.
Well, and that goes back to one thing that we've talked about on the show numerous times is carb loading. It's like I never got when people are on a carb restricted diet or whatever, or even the supplement companies, they all push the post-workout drinks. And it was like, you got this window of 87 minutes and we need to pack in carb. It's like, I always lean towards let's fuel for the training session.
Yeah.
If I have sugar-rich blood, I can use that. And then I know I'm fueled for this intense training session. And then after today, I'm going to have more than 48 hours before I do it again. I'll get enough carbs in without cramming them, in that 48-hour period of much lower activity. Whereas I just never got why there wasn't all the pre-workouts you see are stimulant based and not nutrient based. It's how about you give me nutrients and I don't know why a supplement company hasn't latched onto that. And tried to promote it, but
to your point about pre-workout, throwing some protein's way more thermogenic than carbs and fats. Just getting some protein and carb, before you go. That's got to help at least on some level, I would think. For listeners, most recommendations for super elite people, I'm thinking about some of Juke and Drup, some of the stuff he could talk about pushing this higher, but 30 to 60 grams of carbs an hour is sort of a typical recommendation about what you should be taking in during. But to your point, setting the stage beforehand, that pre-game meal, we talked about that recently, right? When I would, out of traditions, the football team would eat 4.5, 5 hours earlier. I'm like, well, maybe something right beforehand, especially if you're going to be out there in the cold and it's literally going to deplete you, right? I don't think people realize that. I mean, as humans, we're homeotherms. We're going to hold 37 degrees C, 98.6 Fahrenheit, whatever. You got to burn something to do that. And when you plunge yourself into this brutal environment where it's very, very cold and you're wet and you're from convection and evaporation, whatever, you're just draining that heat and your body's working overtime just to generate the heat.
Yeah.
Yeah. For people that are super busy who are, healthy and training harder, I mean, I've used 10 to 20 grams of EAAs or a scoop of whey protein, 1 to 2 scoops of Vitargo, which is 35 to 70 grams of carbs, sodium, 10 to 12, 15 grams of collagen. Drink that 40 to 60 minutes before. Make sure you mix it correctly with enough fluid. Other than that, that's something simple people can do on the way to the gym. Pretty much everyone I've used that with is oh, wow, my performance was a lot better and my recovery was better. It's if you can eat within a couple hours beforehand, great. You probably don't need that. But if it's been 4 hours, you don't have any time and you're literally just driving to the gym, then do something like that, especially if you're doing a longer, over an hour weight training session. It does make a pretty big difference.
Mike, why the collagen?
I like loading collagen beforehand based off of some of the stuff from Keith Barr's work. There's been a couple other studies. A couple other people have kind of replicated it, and it's for recovery of soft tissue. So there is, Jordan showed in his study, there is some change in some of the collagen markers with just protein. But they've shown, 12 to 15 grams, 40 to 60 minutes before exercise with a small amount of vitamin C. One of them was at an engineered ligaments or tissue. The other was looking at kind of functional outcomes. they did show that the collagen does seem to respond to that. And if you think about, like we're talking about with joints and everything else, they did another study looking at collagen and osteoarthritis in the knees, showed it was improved over time. So my thought is just getting the substrate in more for the soft tissue and the muscle tissue. And it doesn't look like collagen is helpful without timing it before exercise if you want kind of the specific soft tissue effects. Data on that is mixed. I think you still get some benefits from collagen for, skin and, hair, nails, that kind of stuff. But I like targeting it to the soft tissue itself. And then the last component, if you have someone who's really going crazy and doing more rehab or something like that, the mechanism appears to reset about every 6 hours. So for some athletes who are really trying to recover faster, I'll have them do that in their morning session, and they'll have them do that before their afternoon session. And you can get fancy and pair that with just some easy isometric type exercise to stress the soft tissue from having the stress shielding that's going on. And I don't know, I've been doing that off and on with athletes depending on as needed for almost 3.5, 4 years now. And anecdotally, they seem to recover a lot of the kind of niggly, weird injuries and stuff that they have. It's not necessarily an injury. It's not bad enough to see a physical therapist or get it fixed, but those kind of weird niggly things just seem to clear up within about 2 to 6 weeks.
Yeah, prevention, man.
Yeah. And also you think about what do most average gym bros hurt? It's usually not a muscle, it's the soft tissue.
Mm-hmm.
So even if I don't really know of any downside, it does take a little more time and is a little bit more of a cost, but yeah, I figure I'd hedge my bets in that direction all day because I know that's probably the weak link and the higher injury risk.
I was curious if you were adding that for an additional thermogenic response. It was something I wasn't aware of.
Not that I know
cocktail?
of.
Okay, yeah. Well, now, for listeners, can you recommend, is it a specific? I mean, there's so many different types of collagen, type 2 undenatured and all this. What would you suggest, since we're on this bandwagon? And let's face it, joints in the cold, it's still, on theme here. So,
yeah, I like using the Bubs collagen. I know the guys there. I do some affiliate work for them, although I don't make much money at all. But they tend to use basically it's a bovine derived from South America. So it's only from grass-fed cattle. A lot of times I don't get too worried about that, but anything that becomes physically part of my tissue, I'm going to spend a little bit more money and make sure it's a higher quality and there's not a bunch of other weird things potentially in there. Mm-hmm. I'm not convinced that you need all the different types of collagen that are out there. So I just tend to go with the simple bovine-derived, collagen.
Oh, good.
Most of the studies I've seen on joint stuff, at least that's what it seems to help. Again, they even did a study on gelatin, which has a very similar profile, amino acid-wise, to that.
It's cooked collagen, yeah.
Yeah. So as of now, I don't think you need to. I'm not convinced by all the other types that you need to get that fancy. And furthermore, we don't know 100% yet if it's the collagen providing the actual amino acid substrates. There is a whole slew of peptides that show up in the collagen, and there's some emerging data, and you talk to collagen researchers that most of the ones I've talked to now think that the peptides that come along with the collagen might be a good reason why it seems to have beneficial effects. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of why I go in that direction.
Mm-hmm. Well, that makes me feel better. I get that Now brand for most things. I just kind of trust those guys, and I just got a big powder thing because I was buying for a while. I'm like, okay, my joints are shot. I got capsules of that, just type 2 collagen. This is what you want. I'm like, I'll give it a go. Why not? But I've come to the same conclusion as you have over the years. Just bone broth, powder. I mean, you need grams and grams. This is not something where I'm going to do it with capsules. So screw that.
Yep.
Just try to get in a nice, blast of many grams. Yeah. But I should start doing that because I'll tend to do that. Like right now, I'll do that and I'll do my little vitamin C in the morning and do my ankle rehab kinds of stuff, But yeah, I was just curious about that. And yeah, I mean, let's face it. If you're exercising in the cold regularly, you're going to do everything you can for your joints because you're right. Those are the ones they're going to take the hit, not the muscle belly typically, so.
Yeah. And last part I had real quick on the warm up is even in the summer, I used to not do much warm ups. And then I noticed, like, especially on an aerobic performance, that if I didn't do a warm-up, my performance all out wasn't nearly as good. So I have a Moxie system, which is a NIRS. It's a little it's a little red light that you shine into the muscle, and just like the pulse ox, but it's looking at the venous portion of the muscle. So you put it on there, and you can tell like how much oxygen is loaded into the muscle. So say like your quad. And what I noticed was if I just walked into the gym cold, didn't do anything, like the max, what they call SMO2, the max amount of oxygen in the muscle would be at like 72, 73%. And if I did a pretty good warm up or, just start doing some easy reps, like you guys were saying, most of the time I could hit 83, 84, 85%. So I'm literally loading at least 10% more oxygen into the muscle before I deplete it with any exercise. And so it's kind of a cool marker I've noticed of just doing a warm up from a bioenergetic standpoint appears to have some benefits too, of being able to load more oxygen into the muscle. That has to do with the whole temperature change, pH change with the, desaturation curves and all that kind of funky stuff.
Yeah, it's a good point. I know we're just about out of time. But yeah, all the biochemistry is just going to be more active when it's warmer, right?
Yep.
I mean, you just get the blood flow in there, get it warmed up. Yeah. It'd be interesting to hear a couple of listeners, if you have any input on this, like how you deal with cold weather. Maybe it's just not an issue because, gyms usually have heaters. They're usually not these cheap bastards like we're talking about with their space heaters and stuff. But even bodybuilders here in Akron, where I trained to compete for so long, he's just got those real old things hanging from the ceiling. You know what I'm talking about? Like these old industrial kind of, heaters. It's not exactly ducted central air kind of goodness. So
yeah, that's what I have in my garage. I had a 220 just electric heater on a temp sensor.
Yeah, and yet you got to make it happen. Got to punch the clock.
Yeah, it works, but I do think there is something to being better adapted to both cold and hot. And I wonder about people being too much of a homeotherm, because like when my grandma was still alive, if you ever go to a nursing home or you see people that are older, unfortunately they're just subjected to the same temperature all the time. They rarely ever get outside. But it would be, 76 in there when we're visiting her, and she's got like a sweatshirt on and got an Afghan, and she's like, oh, it's so cold in here. And you realize over time, like, you actually lose your ability to regulate temperature. And I think that doesn't have any positive. I think it only has negative effects over time.
And even when I used to diet and the cardio I would do as I got lean, I would underdress and go for backpack walks and do my usual purposely to try to waste more heat, right? Why would I bundle in that situation when that, that's going to shift you toward more calorie burning and stuff like that? So that's another little trick too. Anyway.
Yeah, and I think those things do add up over time. Unfortunately, like the cold water immersion and that kind of stuff, it's not magical. Like I did the calculations and read the research. The amount of cold water exposure you need to do to have a significant effect on fat loss is you're almost close to an aftershock, and you're shivering for hours after. It is fucking miserable.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I toyed with that idea too. Like, how about if I just go sit in a fairly cold, like indoor Olympic pool? Because, this would always be during like February as I was trying to get lean for like the April competitive season and stuff. And I just decided what you just said. Nope, too miserable. Bang for the buck is just not there. Just not there.
Yeah. It's like, I'll do more cardio or walk outside,
right,
just a little bit colder.
Right on. Phil, I know you always go squat after the podcast here. Are you about to head out? Are you gonna do that?
Oh yeah. I'm gonna be bundled the hell up. That's the other thing we do that I'd suggest everybody. Like, I will be layered.
Triple
layers.
And then the layers come off. Like, by the end of it, we'll be in t-shirt and shorts.
Yeah.
But you got to get the body temperature. Like, I'll be absurdly layered. And I hate it because then I've got all this padding between me and the bar. And at this point, it's just annoying. But it actually does, like, throw off, at least it feels that way, it throws off your mechanics a bit.
You should post a picture on social media or something. This is me at the beginning.
I'll be all hoodied up, and then I'll be, by the end, we'll have, t-shirts and shorts on.
Yeah.
We'll go in there and do it. And like I said, I'll kick the heaters on. When I get there, I'll probably leave a little early just so it's not too. I'll be like the kid on Christmas Story, and the bar's stuck on my back.
Yeah, you get a little sweaty, a little moist, and it just sticks. Whoa, that's too cold. Too cold.
Yep. So,
all right, guys.
Okay. Well, that's a good show. Everybody stay warm.
Yeah.
Warm up.
Get through the next week.
Get the joints all warmed up if you're training in the cold. So,
all right.
Until next week.
Yeah.
Stop.
Iron Radio is accepting donations. If you like what we do, the professors, the scientists, the bodybuilding show promoters, the athletes themselves in powerlifting and bodybuilding, please consider making a donation or maybe buying something from the ironradio.org store. We also are accepting supporting members. So for $4 a month, which is frankly less than the bank sneaks out of your account in fees, you can step up and support a form of sort of public radio for the bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength community. The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on ironradio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers, and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.